Hey everyone, welcome to my stream. I'm sorry about the inconvenience and a little bit of a delay going on. Turns out that I did start streaming and I hadn't actually clicked the go live button in YouTube, so that's a schoolboy error. But yeah, we'll get straight into it so you guys can catch up with basically everything I've just been explaining to myself for the last 20 minutes. So yeah. Hi Helen. Yeah, very big schoolboy error, but yeah, we'll jump straight into it. So basically, my name's Connor, and I'm here as part of the Collab 365 team, and I'm going to be basically over the next couple of weeks learning the Power Platform in order to complete and pass my PL900. So with that said, the team have set me the challenge of building a solution in the Microsoft Power Platform, which I'm going to be showing with you my journey as I go through it, and hopefully you guys can maybe follow along, help me along the way, share with me the best practices and tips and tricks that you guys have to help me progress with my learning and produce an awesome application. So if we begin with basically a top-down look of what we will be building, and this is going to be what we're going to be calling the external news feed, or the news site, external news site, and it's going to be created using the Power Platform, as said before, and we're going to look at this from a top-down view. So right in the middle here we have our SharePoint list, and this list is going to be created from the SharePoint site itself, which is going to be initiated from Microsoft Teams by creating a channel, which we'll get to in today's little demo. But let's talk about how the actual application will work. So we're going to be taking articles from user-submitted articles from around the web. They're going to be able to submit them in different ways from Microsoft Forms and Microsoft Teams, and then that'll go through an approval process, which we have just here. So I'll go through an approval process, which will then be sent to one of the site administrators, where they will have the opportunity to accept or decline the submitted article. With that being said, if it gets accepted, it will then be placed in the SharePoint site, and then will be pushed out to the SharePoint site itself and the Power App that we're going to be creating further down the line. So if I take a quick look at some of the other things that we're going to be looking towards, and that's going to be having a subscriber list where people in Teams, in your Teams channel, can subscribe to your newsfeed, if you like. They'll be placed in a subscribers list within SharePoint, and with that they're going to be able to subscribe to specific categories. So say for example a user was only interested in the Power Apps articles, then they would only see Power Apps. If they're interested in Dynamics 365, then they'd only get a list of Dynamics 365 articles. But this is going to be something that we're going to be working on in the future. But we're going to get back to the kind of core build of how this whole solution is going to work, and that's going to be based around using SharePoint as a data source. So before I get into it, I just want to point out that, again, I am learning. I'm very new to this. So don't expect any crazy advanced skills going on. Hopefully, further down the line in the future, once my learning kind of progresses, I'll be able to share a bit more like in depth with you guys, and maybe show you some really cool, interesting things that you guys haven't seen before. But with this is just a learning experience for myself and anybody else just getting started. Yeah, it's great that you guys can actually see and hear me now, because I did spend 25 minutes talking with, I could see the chat. I was talking for 25 minutes, but nothing. You guys didn't see anything. So yeah. But anyway, we're going to jump right into it right now. So we're going to go over to Microsoft Teams. And in Microsoft Teams, we are going to create a brand new Microsoft Team channel, which essentially creates a new SharePoint site, which we can then use for our SharePoint lists. So I've done this a few times before. I did this about 20 minutes ago, but we're going to go ahead and create a new team. So down in the bottom left here, we've got join or create a team, and this is under the Teams tab on the left hand side. And we're going to select create a team. And I'm going to do this from scratch because I want to kind of build this myself, knowing exactly what I'm building rather than using a template. I find that using templates and predefined things can sometimes you can get a bit lost when it comes to fixing things that go wrong in the future. Call it practice. Yes, I've had lots of that. So yeah, we're going to create a team from scratch, and I'm going to make this a public team. Reason being is because I know that Mark Jones wanted to assist with this as well and help develop this with me. So it'll just be easier for him to get access to all of the content that I'm currently creating, and vice versa as well. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to give this the team name of External News Site. And in the description, I'm just going to call this, just give this display a list of articles. We'll just call it that for now. We can always rework this a little bit later. And we're going to click create. Nice work. We have our team created, and it's going to start asking us to add members as soon as we made this public to our external news site. For now, I'm just going to skip this. I can always do this at a later date. And we're presented with a brand new channel with the standard, probably what everyone's used to, is the posts, files, and wiki, which comes with every Teams channel that you create. And let's go ahead and open SharePoint. So, as mentioned before, when you create a Teams channel, it creates a SharePoint site, which is linked to this channel, which is really handy, and it's the reason why we are creating this using Teams in the first place over going straight to SharePoint and creating it that way. So if we click the three dots in the top right corner here, and we can see open in SharePoint, and this will open up our SharePoint in our browser. By default, you can be sent to the documents library for the SharePoint site, but it's not what we want. We want to be able to create a list in the SharePoint site, and we do this by going to the site contents, and from here we can click new at the top left, and we can create a new list. And with creating the team as well, you get presented with a few kind of templates. Again, I want to create this from blank, so I know exactly what I'm building, where everything is, and again, if a problem kind of occurs, I know where to go looking for it. Even though none of these templates is what we would require anyway, but that's the reasoning. So we're going to go blank list, and I'm going to give this the title of articles list. Stores the articles, data, and properties. And we'll click create. Yeah, so the reason I'm a bit more relaxed now is I was very nervous at the beginning, but I spent 20 minutes kind of getting into it, so I've built up my energy now. I'm feeling a bit more confident. So anyway, so we got our SharePoint site articles list created, and with every with every SharePoint list, you get given a titles column by default, which we are going to use because we can use that as the title of our blog post. We're going to go ahead and add a few more relevant columns. Now, the columns that we're going to add are going to be columns which will be pre-filled by the users who are submitting their articles, and also we'll have a few behind-the-scenes columns which we're going to kind of look at from more of a monitoring and moderating perspective, such as the amount of clicks that a post gets, or whether the whether the article is going to be featured on the actual news site homepage. So we're going to go ahead and create these columns now. So the first column we're going to need, apart from the title, is going to be the link, and this is going to be the link to the blog post. So we're going to make this of type hyperlink, and we are going to call this, we'll call this blog post URL, and press save. And we're going to go ahead and add another column, which is going to be the featured image URL. So the image that usually appears on, before you even go into an article, usually it will appear on the kind of homepage of most sites such as BBC or even the Carlab 365 Today site. You'll see like a featured image before you actually go into it. It kind of gives you an overlook of what you're looking at. So we're going to make this again a hyperlink, because we're not going to store the image directly in the SharePoint list. Otherwise it's going to end up taking up too much data, storing too many files. So we're actually going to point to this from a URL, external URL. So we'll call this one image URL. As you can see, I've already created that 20 minutes ago. And we'll click save. We're also going to need a category. There's a couple of ways that we can do category, but the way that I'm going to be doing this to start off with, as the category system is going to be a bit more advanced, for something I'm going to do further down the line. But I'm going to store this as a single line of text at the moment, and this is going to allow users to kind of submit their own category names, which we can use. I mean, you could create a separate SharePoint list for certain desired categories that you would like to choose from, in which case you could use choice. And I think there is a more option, and there's actually a categories option, but this will be something that we look at a little bit further down the line. Okay, so yeah, for now, I'm just going to leave that a single line of text, and I'm going to call this category. And again, click save. And we will add our excerpt, which is going to be our short description or first couple of lines from the blog post. And we're going to use multiple lines of text for this. And click save. And for now, we are going to add the click counter and the featured button or yes or no tab for the featured section. This could change further down the line, but this is kind of me looking at this as an overall look at what we're going to be allowing, first of all, the users to create and what we're going to have access to on each individual blog post. So I'll create a number, and I'm just going to call this clicks. Again, this might change. And finally, we're going to add a yes or no, and we're going to call this featured, whether the image is going to be featured or not. Excuse me. We're going to make the default value no for this, otherwise every single blog post that comes in is going to be featured, and then that'll get a bit of a nightmare to kind of moderate. So we've got our column, our list with our columns in here now, but we don't have any data to actually display at the moment. So the way I'm going to allow users to do this, the first way I'm going to allow users to do this is by using Microsoft Forms. And with Microsoft Forms, it'll allow users to go to either a tab in Teams. You can create, you can push your Forms tab to a tab in Teams, or you can just send them to the form URL, where they'll be able to fill out the data, and then it'll be submitted into your SharePoint list. So as I spoke about at the beginning of this session, eventually we'll have a approval workflow process which will be in place between that, which when a user submits their article, it will go through an approval process where an admin will then choose whether or not that article is displayed or not in the articles list. But again, we're going to get to that in a future session. I'm just trying to keep things very simple at the moment. So we're going to create a form, and we're just going to make the form information that gets processed go straight into our SharePoint list. And we're going to do this using Power Automate. So first thing we're going to do is going to head over to Forms, Microsoft Forms, and we're going to create a new form. So we have our new form created. We're going to give it a descriptive title, because if you end up with loads of untitled forms, trying to find the right one in Power Automate, which I've recently discovered, becomes a nightmare. So it's very important to name stuff and keep naming conventions quite descriptive and like kind of full. So we're going to call this one Submit Your Article to the External View Site. For now, we don't need to add a description, but what we will do is start adding the column information that we need. So if I just go back over to SharePoint, what do we want the users to submit? First of all, we need them to submit the title of the blog post. We need the link of the blog post, and we need the image URL, and we need them to put in a category and possibly a short description of the URL. The clicks and featured we don't need to include in this, as that's going to be more back-end, behind-the-scenes stuff. So we'll stick to these first 5 for now. So we'll just go back over to our form and create a new text, and this is going to be title, and we're going to make this required because we want them to be able to actually display the title of a blog post. We're also going to add another text field, and this is going to be the blog post URL. And again, this is going to be required because there's no point having a submission without a URL to actually direct to, so we'll leave that as required. The third one, what did we have? It was the image. We'll call this featured image, just so people know exactly kind of what image to put in there. So featured image URL. And not all blog posts are going to have a featured image, so we will make this not required for this one. And for, let's have a quick look. So we have category and excerpt last. So we'll create a new text input, and we'll call this one category. And we'll make this required. And finally, we're going to add another text field, and it's going to be called the excerpt. And we'll just put short description, just so it's a bit more descriptive. Is that not the right way to spell it? That must be. Which means I must also need to change. Oh, no, that's not right. Change it in there as well. We won't make this one required. It might not be necessary if it's, for example, a video on a blog page with no actual writing on it. So, with this, we can go ahead and preview our form. So we can see it in the desktop view, on a web page view, and a mobile view itself. And we can see that everything is how we want it. I'm going to change, if I go back, I'm going to change this excerpt to a long answer, because there's going to be multiple lines of text here. We just double check that still looks great. And that will be our form. Okay, so if you just bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, so with our form created, we now need to, first of all, be able to receive the information that we are receiving from this input on this form. So we are going to do that using Power Automate, because we need to be able to bring the information submitted from Microsoft Forms into our SharePoint list. And at the moment, there's no current way to actually bring that over. So we're going to head over into Power Automate. And in here, we're going to create a automatic cloud flow. The reason it's going to be an automated cloud flow rather than a manually triggered one is because we have a automatic trigger, and that's going to be, the trigger is going to be when somebody submits information to this form and submits the form. So we can then use that as the trigger to perform our actions in Power Automate. So if I click Automated Cloud Flow, and I can give this a flow name. In fact, I will just click when a new response is submitted in Forms here. If you can't find this here, if you just type in Forms, it'll bring up everything related to Forms, and Forms only has one actual trigger. So we'll do when a new response is submitted, and I'm going to give this the flow name of when an article is submitted in Forms, and I'll click Create. And this will give us a default block, which is based on the choices we just made, which is when a new response is submitted. And the first thing it's going to ask for is a form ID, and this is going to be the ID of the form we just created. So we can click on the drop down here, and we can see article submission form. It's what I just named it. I did a test one earlier, just to kind of see how this process worked. Again, I've kind of pre-planned a lot of this, a lot of the methods that I'm going to be using beforehand, just so I have something a bit more kind of fulfilled to show you. So yeah, I'm going to click article submission form, and if we give that a second, we can then just add our new step. So with the article submission form, I'm just going to check that's the right one. Might not be the right one actually. Sorry, no. Submit your article to the external news site. That was what I kind of named the title. So that's the one that we want, sorry. And then I'm going to click new step, and we need to basically get the responses from this form before we can add it into the SharePoint list. So if we just do a search for get response, we can see that we've got here Microsoft Forms under the Actions tab. So this is the action that gets taken after this trigger is been triggered. So we can see get response details, so I'll click that. And it's going to ask for the form ID. Again, we're going to use the same form which we just used. And the response ID we can use from the dynamic contents sidebar just here. And with this done, we now have a way of getting the responses and breaking up the data that gets submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and click new step. And what I want to do here is I need to create an item in our SharePoint list. So SharePoint has a lot of actions which you can do in Power Automate. One of those is called create item. So again, under actions, SharePoint create item. It's now going to ask for our site address. Now this is the site address that we have created here, which is called external news site. And this will basically give us access to a secondary drop down, which will be our articles list. So if I just go back over to here. So if I click on this drop down, we'll see a list of SharePoint sites that we have for Cloud 365. One we're going to be using is the, let me find it. I think it's this one. And then we have our articles list. So with our articles list selected, it's going to give us a few more options, which actually isn't the correct one. I'm just trying to see. I think it's this one. I'm just going to do a quick refresh because I'm not sure whether it's going to save. Actually, before I do that, let me just see if I can enter a custom value in here. Okay, that won't work. Okay, so I think it's this one. Okay, so that's what I need. So basically what I did there was my site address for my SharePoint site wasn't appearing. I don't know whether that's because I already had the Power Automate window open before I created the team. That could be possibly the reason. But all I did was go to the homepage for our SharePoint site, which I created using Microsoft Teams, and use the URL for the site address in there. So we've now got all of the columns which we placed. If I go back to our site contents, our articles list, we've now got all of these columns available to fill out in our create item box in Power Automate. So we can fill out these details using the dynamic content in Power Automate. So instead of hard coding or hard writing things in here, we can actually just dynamically get these from our dynamic content here. So for the title, easy enough, we'll get our title. Our blog post URL, we'll get our blog post URL. Our image URL, we'll use our featured image URL. So this is getting all the informations for those 5 boxes that we added in forms. For the category, we'll get the category that they chose or inserted, and the excerpt, we'll add the excerpt short description. And we'll leave this by default as no and clicks as empty at the moment, as we don't actually have any information for that to put in there. So that's basically all we need at the moment to be able to start submitting data in Microsoft Forms and visually seeing that in our SharePoint list in SharePoint. So if we click save, they recommend we test it, so I'm just going to do a manual test. Can sometimes take a while, hopefully not too long. But this should come back as that basically it's all working, and that we can then go ahead and use it. So while that's doing, I'm just going to go ahead over to my articles list. We can see that we've got nothing in here at the moment. So we're going to test out our form and make sure that everything goes into the right column. And then we'll probably conclude today's session after that. So I'm just going to head over to the community for Cloud 365, and we're going to choose 1, 2, maybe 3 articles which we want to put into our SharePoint list. So I'm just going to go with the top article at the moment, which is 8 key topics you need in your Microsoft Teams governance plan, which I believe is a workshop which we are running, which Jasper's running, on the 18th of March. But yeah, that's available to purchase if you go over to the old community site. So yeah, if I open this, and we can see we've got the URL here, we've got a featured image which we can use, we've got a title, and we can use the first couple of lines from the actual article blog post itself. So I'm just going to head back over to Power Automate. That's still checking. So what we'll do is we will just go to the computer version of this, and we're going to enter all of the details from this blog post. Further down the line, there is going to be other opportunity to start using connectors in Power Automate, which I've explored a little bit in the past. But basically what we can do is we can use a RSS connector to automatically bring in this information, but that's a little bit out of the scope of this basic kind of beginners me learning how to use things guide at the moment. So yeah, let's go back. So we've got our title here, which we'll just copy. We'll paste that into our title. We've got the blog post URL, which we'll grab from the top here. And to get our featured image, we'll just right click on this, and we will copy image link. There's this one here. And we'll paste that in there. And then categories, just a quick kind of look at this from the top down look, we can see that it's very much Microsoft Teams related. So we will use Microsoft Teams as our category. And in our excerpt, we're just going to copy the first line from the actual blog post, and we'll paste that in there. So if we now hit submit, what will happen is it'll trigger this this automated process to run, and hopefully we should see our article in our external news site SharePoint list. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. It says thanks, your response was submitted. Now, if I'm right, I should be able to just refresh, or I don't even need to refresh, but we can see that the article that we just put in has ended up in our in our SharePoint list. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this for 2 more blog posts. Coincidentally, my one of my first blog posts this year is in here. So we can click submit another response and put the title. We'll grab the URL, we'll copy the image link, and I'm going to give this the category of Power Platform, and we can just use the first paragraph of my short description. Again, we can submit. And we'll submit another response, and we'll grab the third item, which is by Mark Jones. Is Dynamics 365 worth learning? If you attended the Dynamics Day, 1 week ago? Yeah, it's 1 week ago. Time flies. 1 week ago, then you'll know that the answer to this is actually yes. I've learned quite a little bit. Not much that I can put into practice at the moment, because I kind of still need to learn the fundamentals of the Power Platform before I can start using this, but I saw some great use cases of Dynamics 365, which would be awesome to get involved with. But yeah, where was we? So we need the title. We need the blog post URL. Featured image. There is no featured image on the actual page itself, so I wonder if we can grab this from copy image link. probably be a very small version, but it will do for now. And we'll give this the title of Dynamics 365, and we'll just grab the first line here. So we'll grab this line here, and again we'll submit. Yeah, I've heard Dataverse being mentioned quite a lot. Again, it's nothing that I've explored at the moment. So yeah, you're very right though. It's very worth exploring and looking into. Because I think we did a few sessions on it recently, probably at GlobalCon 4, which I was around for. And yeah, it did look maybe a little bit more technical than SharePoint. But anyway, going back to Microsoft SharePoint, we can see that our 3 blog posts are now in here and they're submitted correctly. If we just extend our title, we can see that our titles are in there as they should be. Our blog post URLs are clickable, so if we just go ahead to the first one and this will open up in a new tab, it takes us right to the right page. We have our image URL. Again, if I click this, it'll show us that image. Eventually, we'll get to the point where we can extract this image to be able to use in our Power Apps itself. But for now, we just have the data there available to use. And we have our categories and our excerpt. We know it's not a featured post at the moment. But yeah, that's basically how our articles list will work. And eventually we're going to have more ways to enter this data into this SharePoint list. For instance, bringing our Microsoft form into Microsoft Teams as a Teams tab. We could even bring in the actual SharePoint list itself with the options to add your own lists using the SharePoint site, which you can basically do by going here under the articles list, clicking new and filling out the data here as necessary. But this is more kind of aimed towards the kind of administrative point of view, as they'll have access to the kind of clicks, the featured, and stuff like that. So if you're keeping this more of a end user kind of point of interaction, then it's probably best to use forms. But again, this is all part of my learning process. It's going to be ways that I can explore how to utilize different ways to import data into our SharePoint list, and eventually hopefully have a kind of more fully built solution which kind of works for everyone, both users and administrators. Yeah, I did a bit of looking around and digging around today, and yeah, you're right. There's a lot of ways to do things in Microsoft 365 as a whole. I mean, personally, it can become a bit overwhelming, like especially for myself, like not knowing much and kind of getting to grips with the basics, and you realise that there's 10, 15, 100 ways to do the basics. But I suppose for more of a kind of advanced Power Platform developer, them extra 100 ways to do one thing will become useful, because it will trigger other kind of properties, for example, that you can manipulate. But yeah, I can see why people would get confused with this, including myself. But yeah, that's why I'm here to kind of share is my learning journey and how I'm going to kind of progress through all this. So let's take a look. I know that Microsoft Teams has been playing up for me recently, but hopefully we can kind of get this working. So if I go over to my external news site team, which I created, and we're going to give it a try. If Teams doesn't want to mess me about today, we're going to try and add a new tab, and this is going to be the Microsoft Forms tab that we created. So we'll give this a try. So we're going to click Add Tab at the top here. And yep, unable to take this action right now. I'll see if I can do it this way. See if I can type in forms. I'm not sure if this is the right method, but we'll give it a try. No, it doesn't really want to be doing anything for me at the moment. We'll give this one more try. Oh, here we go. So here we can add a tab and we can use forms here. Hopefully this gives me something, because it didn't earlier. No, it doesn't. It doesn't want to be any help today. So let me just quickly jump back to here. So let's just quickly take a look at what we've actually built today and what we've done. So we have the first kind of draft overlook at this Microsoft form that we created, where users will be able to input data into our SharePoint list, which goes through that. Which doesn't go through the approval workflow at the moment. It just gets straight imported into here. So the approval workflow will come in a little bit further down the line throughout that flow that we created in here. There will be an approval process which will be continuing to build again further down the line. I'm not sure when. There's probably a lot of other things which we need to kind of look at first before that becomes the kind of key topic for a session that I'll be doing. So we can get rid of that for now. But yeah, if I head back over here, we can kind of see what we've done today. So we have created a new Teams channel in Teams, which basically creates the SharePoint site. And we've created our articles list in that SharePoint site that gets created. And we've added some articles manually to it using forms. So some areas to look at maybe next week on Friday. So for those that don't know, basically every Friday at 3 p.m, I know it was a little bit later today, but every Friday at 3 p.m, I'm going to look to kind of go live and kind of share with you my journey, where we're at with this building process. And hopefully receive some suggestions from you guys. Hopefully be able to answer some more questions. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for now. But yeah, next week we're going to kind of look at maybe more of the Power App side of things. So we'll look at bringing all of the information that we had in our SharePoint site over into Power Apps, and I believe that we can do that in Power Apps itself without using any other tools, but there might be probably a possibility that I'll be using Flow. Again, over the next week I'm going to be learning more, doing some more of the course that I'm currently on in the Power Platform, kind of see how things fit together and hopefully implement that into this solution which I'm building today. So yeah, thank you all for attending. It's been great. I apologise for the delay at the beginning of this stream, but I hope to see you all next week, Friday, 3 p.m. UTC time. I will stick around and see if there's any questions for the next minute to 2 minutes in chat. So yeah, try using the Microsoft Teams via the browser and see if it makes a difference for you. Usually it does. I also then have very annoying login issues using the Teams browser one because I use a different email address on my browser. I should probably have two browsers. But yeah, we'll start with that next week, and try and bring in that Microsoft form into our Teams, and I'll go through that and try and use the Microsoft Teams browser application rather than the Windows one. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. I'll see you again next week, Friday, 3 p.m. UTC time. Have a great week.